Today's lesson is the changing shades of color. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
Hello, I'm Kiki. Roger, what's your favorite color?
I kind of like azure blue or dark pink, magenta, and fuchsia, colors like that. How about you?
Actually, we're on the same kind of color spectrum. I like those colors too.
They are pretty cool. I used to have a couple of shirts in those colors, but they got old and they started to fall apart, and I haven't been able to find shirts in that color again. I've been very sad about that, but those colors are similar to the colors we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about pink and blue and whether we associate those colors with boys or girls.
Right. And usually when we think of a certain color, we'll kind of associate it with a certain type of gender. But nowadays, we're trying to step away from gender norms, and we want to be inclusive. So we want to let colors belong to everyone and let it kind of be a gender neutral thing, right? Anybody can enjoy any colors, just like you mentioned. You liked magenta, right? And traditionally, magenta, people might think of it for a certain type of gender. But actually, I think you look pretty good in magenta.
And in the title, we do have the word shade. It's like a different degree of the same color. There are different kinds of shades of blue, for example, different shades of green. You could also say hues as well. That has the same meaning, like Kelly green, teal, emerald green. Those are different shades of green.
So today, we're going to be talking about the changing shades of color, which we're also talking about how the meaning of certain colors might be changing.
Let's get to it. Let's listen to the first part of our lesson, and we'll be right back.
The changing shades of color. How can you tell if a baby is a boy or a girl? In the US, it can be as simple as noting whether the baby is wearing pink or blue. Indeed, the idea that pink is for girls and blue is for boys is so ingrained in our minds that we may not even question its origin. But how and when did this tradition begin? Before colored baby clothes came along, parents typically dressed their babies in white cotton dresses, which were easy to wash and convenient for diaper changes. Around 1850, though, baby clothes became available in different pastel shades. While these items were popular, no distinctions had yet been made about whether a particular color was more suitable for boys or girls.
大家好，第一部分我们来介绍形容词 ingrained， 它的意思是根深蒂固的。例如 The students' ingrained study habits are the result of their teachers' tireless efforts. 学生们根深蒂固的读书习惯是他们老师努力不懈的成果。下一个我们看到片语 come along， 意思是出现、开始存在，也可以是降临的意思。例如 William jumps at any business opportunity that comes along. William 会把握任何出现的商机。再来我们看到 pastel 是形容词，指的是淡浅色的或是颜色柔和的。我们可以说Teresa likes wearing pastel clothes during summer because it makes her feel refreshed. Teresa 喜欢在夏天时穿浅色衣服，那让她觉得很清爽。也可以说 As a painter, Martin likes using pastel colors on his watercolor. 作为一名画家 Martin 喜欢在水彩画上使用柔和的色彩。
So let's begin today by talking about how can you tell if a baby is a boy or a girl? In the U.S., it can be as simple as noting whether the baby is wearing pink or blue. So usually when you see a baby dressed in blue, you'll think it's a baby boy. And if you see a baby dressed in pink, you'll know that it's a girl. And usually at the hospitals, they'll give these babies blue blankies or blue little knitted bonnets and stuff. So they'll know how to identify the gender of the baby.
Yes, that is the case in the United States. This is so ingrained in our minds that we may not even question its origin. So if something's ingrained, it's permanent, it's there, and indeed, most people associate blue with boys and pink with girls. It's very ingrained in our minds. And hey, because of that, we probably don't know how this concept came about, but that's what we're going to try to answer. And here's the question, but how and when did this tradition begin? Well, here in the next paragraph it says, before colored baby clothes came along, parents typically or usually dressed their babies in white cotton dresses, which were easy to wash and convenient for diaper changes. So if you talk about something coming along, that just means it appears and it becomes popular. So before colored baby clothes existed, before they came along, parents would just simply dress their babies in white cotton dresses. Dresses are usually worn by girls, but if you're a baby boy, it doesn't really matter because it's open at the bottom and it makes changing that diaper really easy.
Right. And these cotton dresses, they're easy for the parents to change their diapers. And since they're babies, they're not really going to walk around. So the end of the dress, they're able to wrap it back up as you're swaddling the baby, right? So these white cotton dresses were something that was very convenient for babies to wear. It didn't matter the gender of the baby. It was just more of a convenience for their caretaker. And around 1850, though, baby clothes became available in different pastel shades. So around the 1850s, that's when baby clothes started to come in color and in these specifically different pastel shades. So when we're describing something as pastel, it is a lighter shade or a lighter, softer hue of a certain color. So for example, we know the color blue, but when we think of sky blue or light blue, those are more pastel colors. They're softer and they kind of have a powdery feeling to it. And these are the colors or the shades that they would use for baby clothes.
Right. You mentioned blue, but I'm thinking of purple. Purple is kind of a dark color, but if you add white to it in paint, then it becomes pastel purple, kind of like a periwinkle color. And these are shades, again, or hues. And while these items were popular, no distinctions had yet been made about whether a particular color was more suitable for boys or girls. So while these items were popular, yes, it is true they were popular, still there were no distinctions between whether a particular color was for a boy or a girl. So if you talk about a distinction, that just means a difference in something. It's a contrast between things that are actually kind of similar. For example, a lot of people can't notice the distinctions between Chinese and Japanese. If you're a Westerner, for example, when you hear Chinese and Japanese, it might sound all the same to you. You don't notice any distinctions.
So a distinction can also be something that you use to identify something. And in this case, these colors for baby clothes, they didn't decide whether or not they were going to choose a certain color for a certain type of gender. So let's listen to part 2 and find out exactly when did we start to decide a color belonged to a certain gender.
According to some scholars, sex appropriateness was first assigned to the colors blue and pink at the turn of the 20th century, but in reverse of today's standards. As pink was considered a variant of red, a strong color, it was thought to be more suitable for boys. In contrast, blue was seen as a softer color that looked better on girls. However, these views were likely short-lived and not nearly as widespread as today's stereotypes of blue for boys and pink for girls. Still, they show how color associations can be determined by the cultural ideas of a given time. Pink and blue remained popular baby colors throughout the first 3 decades of the 20th century. But it wasn't until the 1940s that the sex-specific views of them familiar to us today began to take root. That's also when parents shifted from white dresses to gender-specific clothes, such as miniature blue pants or pink skirts for their babies. At the height of the feminist movement in the 1960s and 70s, however, many parents opted for gender-neutral colors. Nevertheless, by the 1980s, pink once again came to be associated with girls and blue with boys.
"第二部分我们看到单字 reverse， 它是名词，指的是相反的情况 或是相反的顺序。例如 Sharon thought that she would pass the driving test, but the outcome was in reverse. Sharon 以为她会通过驾驶考试，结果却恰恰相反。或者 Stan thought his girlfriend would like the gift, but the reverse was true. Stan 以为他的女朋友会喜欢这份礼物，但事实恰恰相反。下一个介绍 miniature 意思是小型的或是微型的。例如 Dave has a collection of miniature cars, and he keeps them on a shelf in his home. Dave 收藏了一系列的迷你汽车，他把它们放在家里的架子上。或是 Craig bought a miniature Eiffel Tower in Paris as a souvenir. Craig 在巴黎买了一个迷你埃菲尔铁塔当纪念品。再来是片语Opt for 名词表示选择点点点，可以说 For my hotel reservation, I decided to opt for the luxury package. 对于预定下榻的旅馆，我决定要选豪华的包套行程。又或者说 Jeff opted for a smaller car to save money on fuel. Jeff 为了节省燃料费用，选择了一部小车。
Okay, let's move on now to the second part of our article for today. This is a very important question, so we've got scholars who are researching this particular question, and according to some scholars or researchers, sex appropriateness was first assigned to the colors blue and pink at the turn of the 20th century, but in reverse of today's standards. So, of course, if something's appropriate, it's suitable, and appropriateness is the noun form. And if you're talking about something being appropriate for genders, then you're talking about something that is specific for different genders. In this case, we're talking about the colors blue and pink, and they became specific for different genders. They were sex appropriate. However, in this particular case, they were in reverse of today's standards. So reverse here just means backwards or in the other direction. For example, sometimes people post selfies on the internet, but they're in reverse because they didn't go into the menu and change things around in terms of how the image is saved. So they'll be wearing a shirt that says Taipei, but it will be in reverse. It will be IEPIAT in reverse.
Right. So in today's standards, we think of pink for girls and blue for boys. But back in those days, it was the opposite. It was in reverse. As pink was considered a variant of red, a strong color, it was thought to be more suitable for boys. So we talk about pink. The color pink is when you add white into red, so it becomes a lighter color and it is rosier. But because it was a variant of red, it is thought to be a strong color. So when something is a variant of something, it just means a different version of something, or when something is different from its original form. Okay, so in this case, it is different from the standard color red. It is a variant. It is a lighter red. It is pink. So white is added. And because red is thought of as a strong color, they thought being strong meant that it was a better symbol, more suitable for boys.
Right, so a variant, again, is a form or version of something. Of course, we all know about the COVID-19 pandemic. There were different variants of the virus. There was the beta variant, the Omicron variant. We all remember those news reports a couple of years ago. And so it's a variant of red. You just add white to red and you get pink, and people thought that's more appropriate for boys because red is a strong color. And blue was seen as a softer color that looked better on girls. Actually, girls can wear any color. It seems to me that when I try to buy clothes for myself, we boys don't have many choices. We've got dark blue, we've got gray, we've got white, and we've got black. We don't get a pick from fuchsia or magenta or orange or colors like that. You guys are lucky.
So in contrast, in comparison to something. So in this case, when you compared the color blue to red, it was thought of to be a more softer color. So when it's softer, it is more calm. It's not as bold and not as strong. So in this case, they thought that it would look better on girls, and that's why the color blue was associated with girls. However, these views were likely short-lived and not nearly as widespread as today's stereotypes of blue for boys and pink for girls.
So not nearly as just means not as much as you think. You're not nearly as smart as you think you are. A stereotype is just some kind of view we have about people because we don't really know them individually. There are stereotypes about different kinds of people or about genders. Still, they show how color associations can be determined by the cultural ideas of a given time. Yes, indeed, these ideas change during different eras in history. And in the next paragraph here, it says, pink and blue remained popular baby colors throughout the first 3 decades of the 20th century, but it wasn't until the 1940s that the sex-specific views or gender-specific views of them, familiar to us today, began to take root. So it started in the 1940s, around the time of World War II. We started to associate pink with girls and blue with boys.
That's also when parents shifted from white dresses to gender-specific clothes, such as miniature blue pants or pink skirts for their babies. So we know that in the olden days, before the 1940s, children or babies, they will wear these cotton white dresses, and then eventually they had cotton colored dresses. But now, after the 40s, they started to have mini versions of adult clothes. So they will have small pants, small skirts, and small shirts. And these items of clothing will have different colors and specifically gender-specific or sex-specific colors. So you will think of blue pants for little boys and pink skirts for little girls.
So we've got miniature or smaller blue pants or pink skirts. A miniature, of course, is a smaller version of something. Like Tomica cars are miniature versions of cars. They're toy cars, so they're miniatures. And at the height of the feminist movement in the 1960s and 70s, however, many parents opted for gender-neutral colors. So this happened in the 60s and 70s, and we've got lots of parents. They chose or they opted for colors that were gender-neutral. Both boys and girls could wear those colors. Nevertheless, still, by the 1980s, pink once again came to be associated with girls and blue with boys. So things changed back to the way they were in the early 20th century.
Right. So then they started to dress boys in blue again and girls in pink. So let's listen to our final part and wrap things up.
In sum, the gendered associations of pink and blue have shifted over time, along with changing social norms. Therefore, it's clear that no inherent connections can be made between an individual's gender identity and any particular color.
最后第3部分看到形容词 inherent， 指的是与生俱来的或是天生的。举例来说 ，Some of the best managers have an inherent ability as leaders。一些优秀的管理者与生俱来就有当领导者的能力。最后一个例子 ，Many small animals like mice have an inherent fear of dogs and cats。许多小型动物，例如老鼠，天生就恐惧狗和猫。
Okay, so here in the final part it says, in sum or in summary, to conclude, the gendered associations of pink and blue have shifted over time along with changing social norms. So gender, of course, just refers to whether you're a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. Those are gender associations, and of course we think of women as being pink and boys as being blue, but not always. That seems to be changing again. I've seen lots of boys wearing pink shirts. But still, that's kind of the norm nowadays. A norm is just something that is normal in society. We talk about social norms, for example. An example would be it's expected that the boy pays for the first date if a boy and a girl go out together.
Right. And as we've learned throughout our article today, colors or the idea of colors associating with a certain gender have changed throughout history, but it is still changing even in modern day because as society changes and as social norms change, the things that people accept or the ideas that people accept, they're changing as well. Therefore, it's clear that no inherent connections can be made between an individual's gender identity and any particular color. So when we think about color, it should not define a person's gender identity or a person's gender in any particular way. Anybody should be able to wear whatever color they want. So in this case, it's very obvious that colors do not determine the person that you are. Colors don't define your gender identity.
And here we've got the word inherent, which means it is a part of something. It's kind of permanent. It's there. You need to take it into consideration. Like if you like mountain climbing, you do need to remember that there are inherent dangers involved with mountain climbing. You could always fall off if you're not careful and be seriously injured or even killed. So you got to be careful there. And yes, indeed, we don't have these inherent connections which can be made between an individual's gender identity and any particular color. But of course, that's the way things are. Nowadays, we do think of girls in terms of pink and boys in terms of blue, at least some of the time or most of the time. Okay, that's it for our explanation. Here comes Hanny, who just happens to be wearing pink today.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny， 今天要来练习篇章结构的题型。那这次的文章标题是 The Changing Shades of Color， 这是在讲颜色与性别关联的演变。那题目有4个空格，但是有5个选项，我们就先来看看这5个句子。 A 他提到Pink and blue remained popular baby colors throughout the first 3 decades of the 20th century. 粉红色和蓝色在20世纪的前30年间仍然是受欢迎的婴儿颜色。注意这个选项它有提到 remained popular 仍然受欢迎，然后还有提到时间点 throughout the first 3 decades of the 20th century 在20世纪的前30年间，所以这边要注意一下哦。再看到 B 选项他说 While these items were popular, no distinctions had yet been made about whether a particular color was more suitable for boys or girls. 虽然这些物品很受欢迎，但尚未区分是否特定颜色更适合男孩或女孩。那这个选项的关键词语是 while 虽然，然后还有注意到 these items 这些物品，那所以它前面的句子应该就会提到某些物品或商品之类的。好，那么 C 选项 In the 19th century Blue and pink were the preferred colors for baby clothing among the elite class. 在19世纪，蓝色和粉红色是精英阶级对婴儿衣物的首选颜色。那注意到这个选项有提到时间 in the 19th century 在19世纪。好，看到 D 选项他说 However, these views were likely short-lived and not nearly as widespread as today's stereotypes of blue for boys and pink for girls. 然而这些观点可能很短暂，并且远不及今天蓝色适合男孩，粉红色适合女孩的刻板印象那么普遍。好，那这个选项的关键词语是 however， 然而它是个转折词嘛，然后还有注意到 these views 这些观点，所以它前面的句子应该会提到有别于蓝色适合男孩，粉红色适合女孩的观点。好，再看到 E 选项他说 At the height of the feminist movement in the 1960s and 70s, however, many parents opted for gender-neutral colors. 然而在1960和70年代女权运动的鼎盛时期，许多父母选择中性的颜色。注意这个选项有提到时间点 in the 1960s and 70s 在1960和70年代。好，那现在我们看完5个选项要表达的意思，还有要注意的重点，我们就来做题目吧。好，第一个空格呢是位于第2段的最后一句，这段有提到说，在有色彩的婴儿服出现前， 父母通常会让婴儿穿着方便清洗及换尿布的白色棉质衣物。那到了1850年左右才开始有柔和色调的衣物出现。那么下一段的第一句则提到一些学者认为蓝色和粉红色首次被赋予性别合适性是在20世纪之交 at the turn of the 20th century。 那根据这些线索，我们就知道空格里面要填入的句子可能就是关于颜色、上位跟性别连结的讯息。那我们的选项 B 它就有提说，虽然这些物品很受欢迎，但是尚未区分是否特定颜色更适合男孩或女孩，这边是符合前后文语义的。那关键词 these items 指的就会是前面提到的那些不同色彩的婴儿服。好，接着我们看到第二个空格，它前面提到粉红色被视为是红色的变体，是一种强烈的颜色，因此较适合男孩，而蓝色则被视为较适合女孩的柔和颜色。这就是有别于蓝色适合男孩，粉红色适合女孩的观点咯。而且空格后面有提到说，尽管如此，他们还是展示了颜色的联想是如何由特定时代的文化观念所决定的。好，我们这边就推断说，空格里面应该填入可以衔接语义转折内容，而且从语义上来看，最适合就会是 D 选项。这些观点可能很短暂，并且远不及今天蓝色适合男孩，粉红色适合女孩的刻板印象那么普遍。好，我们看到第三个空格，它是出现在下一个段落的第一句。那么前一段有提到说，是在20世纪之交开始出现把蓝色和粉红色赋予不同性别。至于在空格后面则提到，但直到1940年代，我们今天所熟悉的特定性别观点才开始扎根。那这篇文章它是按照时间顺序来叙述的，从时间点和语义来判断，最适合选项就是 A。 它有提到粉红色和蓝色在20世纪的前30年间，所以就是在1940之前嘛，所以这边时间点是符合的。他就说在这段期间仍然是受欢迎的婴儿颜色。好，那第四个空格，他前面提到说，直到1940年代，现在我们熟悉的特定性别观点才开始扎根。那么空格后面则提到，不过到了1980年代，粉红色又再度与女孩联想在一起，而蓝色和男孩联想在一起。从时间轴和语义上来看，最适合选项就是1。然而在1960和70年代的女权运动鼎盛时期，许多父母选择了中性的颜色，所以这边也可以用时间轴判断。那至于没有选到的选项 C， 他说19世纪蓝色和粉红色是精英阶级对婴儿衣物的首选颜色，它其实放在任何一个空格都不符合句意，所以就不能选咯。好，那以上今天的讲解，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Diaper. Vincent heard the baby crying and got up to change her diaper.Appropriateness. Cindy carefully considered the appropriateness of each slide to make sure it conveyed the right message. Reverse. His actions were completely in reverse of what he had promised. Miniature. The children were fascinated by the miniature model of the ancient castle. Norm. It can be challenging for people to break away from traditional social norms. Inherent.The love for storytelling seems to be an inherent characteristic in the Addams family. Distinction. The distinction between the two products lies in their quality. Stereotype. Gender stereotypes can limit individuals in pursuing careers and interests.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoy reading along with us. I am Kiki.
I am Roger.
See you next time.